Greetings, my name is Odin from the Odin's Musings YouTube channel, and I'm here on behalf of Aura Crystals. Today I'm going to be teaching you all about the cubic right angle weave. This is an intermediate to advanced stitch used to create ropes and other transitions commonly used to make necklaces for pendants or even structure designs on their own, using right angles to create squared shapes. This technique requires knowledge in the flat right angle weave, so if you don't know this stitch already, feel free to check out our link on the subject in the description box below or at the eye up in the corner. I'm going to be showing you the basics of this stitch and kind of how to get your mind into the setup for how to create this box stitch. So for materials, you can use whatever you would like. However, I'm going to be keeping it simple and using size 11 seed beads. I'm going to be using 4 different colors of seed beads in order to indicate where I'm supposed to be and how many beads I add per stitch. If you want to turn this project into a piece of jewelry, you will need a clasp of your choice. In my case, it's a lobster claw and a jump ring, and 2 accent beads to hold the piece together. I am also using a D-weight white Nymo and a size 12 needle. This stitch is relatively forgiving, so feel free to use a size 10 if you're more comfortable with that. And with all that being said, let us get started. So if we take a look at what the right angle weave is, by taking a look at this seed bead example, it's basically 4 sides made of 4 beads around. However, if we take a look at the corner, you'll notice that the seed bead in between 2 sides are interlocking. So we don't need to add 4 beads at every time. As we progress through the stitches, we'll need to add fewer beads in order to move and complete a whole wall. So to account for this, I've got my 4 colors here. I'm going to use purple whenever I need to add 4 beads, which is just for the start, so I will only need this color at the very beginning. Then I will change over to when I need to add 3 beads, then 2 beads, and then 1 bead. So keep that in mind. You can match the colors that I have. You'll find a link in the description box down below of the exact colors that I've used, so you can follow along with the same colors. So we're going to start off with our base color, where I must add 4 seed beads. This is the only time that I'm going to do the 4 at the same time. So I'm going to pull this down, then pass my needle back through all of these beads once more to form a loop. When I pull tight, I should have something like this. Now I'm going to take my tail and my working thread, and I'm going to tie an overhand knot with both of those threads. Now we have formed our base ring. At each one of these 4 beads, we're going to build 4 walls to make our new stitch. I'm going to then start off by passing my needle through one of the beads. Then I'm going to switch colors, and my first wall, I'm only going to add 3 beads, because the 4th bead is already here. So all I do is pass back through that same bead, so that we form our next circle of 4. We have 4 here and 4 here, but they're joined together by the same bead. Now we need to move on to continue our next stitch. I'm going to rotate and pass through the next bead on our base ring. Now if we flip the stitch perpendicular to our base ring, you'll notice that we have 2 of 4 beads for our next stitch. One is from the anchor point on the base row, and 1 is from the stitch that we've just added. So because we have 2 here, I only need to add 2 more beads. So I'm going to switch colors again, add 2 beads. In order to complete the loop, and we're going back around in this direction, I'm going to pass through the silver bead so that we complete our loop, and you will see we have a new circle of 4. We have the base row, the previous wall, and 2 beads that we've added to complete this row. Now we need to set up and go to the next stitch. So since my thread is coming down from the silver bead, I'm going to pass through to get back onto our anchor bead. And in order to repeat our previous step, I'm going to go through the next anchor bead. And once again, we have 2 beads that already exist in this next circle of 4. We have our 2 walls built here. Now we just need to complete a 3rd wall and wrap around again. So I'm adding another 2 beads because I only need 2. Pass back down through the previous bead on the previous wall to complete the next circle of 4. Now we need to move on to our last stitch. We go through the anchor bead again, and then through the second anchor bead. But there's something different about this stitch. You will see we have 3 beads that exist to make a wall instead of 2. We have the bead from the previous wall, and we have the bead from the very first stitch that we made when we were along this row. So we're only going to need to add 1 bead, but we have to set up to get to that point first. Right now we're at the anchor point at the bottom. I'm going to move up through the wall, which is the first one that we've added. I'm going to add 1 more seed bead. This is my new color, where I only add 1 bead, and I'm going to go down through the wall on the right. And here we will have completed our wall of 4, and we will have completed our row. Now we need to set up to make a new stitch. So my thread is coming down on this side. I'm going to pass through the anchor point again, move up the left wall, then move over through the top bead. And if you look up, we now have 4 new beads to act as our anchor point. Now what I like to do in order to get some stability is go around through all 4 of these beads at the top once more, then end up back where we started from. And this will complete our stitch. Now we're ready to build on a new row. From here, I have 1 out of 4 beads I need in order to make a completed stitch. So I'm going to add 3 beads and pass back through the bead that we started from. Now my thread has changed direction, so we're going to be working counterclockwise, building around the walls in this direction. So I'm going to pass on my anchor point. In this case it's black. And now we're back to adding 2 beads because there are 2 that already exist here. The anchor point and the previous wall. So I'm going to add 2 beads, pass down through the previous wall to complete our circle of 4. You see it forms a little plus sign there. Now to move on to the next stitch, I'm going to go back down through the anchor point, rotate my piece, and go through the next anchor bead. Taking a look, we have 2 beads that already exist in our circle of 4, so I only need 2 beads. I'm going to add those 2, go back down the previous wall, then through the anchor bead again. Then through the anchor bead again. Now we need to set up for our next stitch. We're going to pass through the next anchor bead, but we have 3 beads that exist here. We have the left wall, the anchor point, and the right wall. So I'm going to go up through the right wall bead, add on my 1 seed bead, go down the left wall, go back through the anchor point and make my way up to the top again by going up the right wall, through the top bead again. Then I'm going to sew together all 4 of the top beads in order to form my next anchor ring. Like so. And finish off by going back through that single blue bead. Now our thread direction has changed again, but the steps are the same thing. You will add 3 beads on top of this anchor point because this is the only bead that is on this next stitch. You'll rotate, move through this anchor point. There will be 2 beads that you need to add. You will connect the next side wall that will be over here and through the anchor bead. Once you've done that, you can rotate, go through, add 2 beads again, rotate, and this is the last stitch, so you'll need to go up through the left wall, add a single bead, and then go back down and around. From there, you sew your 4 top beads again. If you're having problems with thread tensions and the stitch undoing, you can also reinforce each stitch as you're doing it. So, I will add my 3 beads, go back around that anchor point, then I'm just going to sew back through all of those beads once more. Going down, then finally through the anchor point, so that this stitch won't come off as easily, and it's nice and tight where you want it to be. Then I move to my second anchor bead, add on 2 beads, go down the right wall, through the anchor bead again, then wrap around these 4 beads again to reinforce it. Rotate and repeat for the next anchor point and here when you add your first one as well. Then you sew your top beads together and continue on. Repeat in that manner until you have the length that you want, and I can show you how to end threads and add new ones. So after a few stitches more, this is what your piece more or less looks like. Just remember the 3, 2, 2, 1 rule when it comes to building a full set of 4. Now ending threads and adding new ones is fairly simple. What we're going to do is make half-hitch knots down the line using any of our exposed threads here. So I'm just going to pick up one of my threads, pass my needle through until I form a loop, then pass through that loop and pull tight. Going to work down a couple of beads, 1 or 2, and make another knot. So I pick up a thread bridge and pull through until I form a loop, pass my needle through that loop, and pull tight. I'm going to go down, do another knot, go down, and do another knot. Around 3 or 4 knots is good for extra security. Then once you're done with that, you can go ahead and clip your threads. Attaching a new thread is similar, but we're going to work further down. So I'm going to pass through one of the beads on the side, doesn't really matter which one it is. Pull through, leaving about a 1-inch tail to hang on to in case something slips. Then I'm going to grab a thread bridge underneath the work. Pull through until I form a loop. Pass my needle through the loop, pull tight. Go up a bead or 2, grab a thread bridge, pull my needle through, put my needle through that loop, and pull tight. Keep going until I'm up at the top again. And then from there, I am ready to continue my stitch. You can also go ahead and clip your tail end, since that one is very nice and secure. To add a clasp onto the end of this piece, we're going to use the top ring of beads in order to secure something in place. I'm coming out of the left side of one bead. I'm going to add my accent bead and then pass through the right side of the bead directly across, securing this in a diagonal. Securing the bead in a diagonal. Now I'm coming from the left side of the top bead. I'm going to pass back through my accent bead and then pass through the right side of the first bead that I started from, so that we've sort of done this figure 8 to anchor this bead down. Now I'm just going to reinforce it by passing through those beads once more, doing the same figure 8 position that we started from. If you feel your thread is nice and secure, go ahead and end up coming out of the accent bead. Then I'm going to add 3 seed beads, half of my clasp, and 3 seed beads. Then pass back through the accent bead to form a loop on top of that. Then I'm going to reinforce by passing through these beads once more, weaving down, back to my stitch, and then making half-hitch knots to end the thread. And that is it for the basics of the cubic right angle weave. Take your time with the stitch and remember your rules when creating each individual wall, and build upwards, and reinforce your stitches as you progress in order to make things a little easier to hold. Have fun and experiment with different bead shapes. If you decide to do this with a variety of sizes and shapes in the same necklace, be sure to transition using smaller beads first so that there isn't too much thread showing as you're doing this. You can kind of see I started with a 15, an 11, a 3mm, and then moved on to the 4mm, so that I keep the thread fairly hidden. Once you get the basics of this step, I can show you other techniques on how to create the cubic right angle weave in order to make it so that you don't show as much thread, and I can also show you the prismatic right angle weave. So be sure to stay tuned for those tutorials in the future. And thank you for joining me on this lesson. I hope you found this technique useful, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Be sure to check down in the description box for the full materials lists, as well as links to where you can purchase supplies. And while you're down there, feel free to subscribe to Aura Crystals for more tutorials and updates on new projects, like these. And if you'd like to see more of my work, feel free to check me out at Odin's Musings right here on YouTube or at odinsbeadhall.com.